everybody, and welcome to the Goot Reaction. I'm your host, Joe Goot, and with me, as always, is my main man from the Midwest. We're going to be talking about the nature of reality today, and I know that's a big topic. So we're going to start with some definitions, just some basic things to kind of get the lay of the land, and then we're probably going to go all over the place. I anticipate this one being one of those that just takes us down a lot of different little rabbit holes and even wormholes. Oh man, that was so cheesy. Sorry. Um, so yeah, let's get going. It's like I said, it's a big topic, and I'm curious to see where we go with it. So let me just lay out a definition of reality first, and we can go from there. So reality is the existence and nature of everything that is knowable, independent of how our minds perceive it. It includes space, time, matter, energy, forces, consciousness, and abstract ideas. And I also thought I would throw in a couple common conceptions of reality, one from Plato and one from Aristotle to start with. And then I want to go into a little bit of Taoism because that kind of fascinates me. And so we'll dive into each of those a little bit here. So Plato's theory of reality, which is known as Platonic realism, suggests that the physical world is not true reality, but rather a representation of it. Plato believed that the true reality is made up of non physical, timeless, and unchanging forms or ideas, which are the essences of all things. The physical world is a shifting exhibition of shadows cast by these forms, and people can only access a representation of reality through their senses. So he was all about saying we can't really experience the real reality, we just experience a shadow version of it through our senses. And his theory of reality is divided into two dimensions: the world of being, which is the fundamental reality, and the world of becoming, which is the world of experience. So again, he believed that the world of becoming is a mere shadow of the world of being. Now, Aristotle, on the other hand, his understanding of reality was based on empiricism, which is the idea that we use our senses to make sense of the world. He believed that the best way to understand reality was to understand the purpose of things, or as that would be called, their telos. He also believed that the basic realities of the world were perceptible things or middle sized material objects. So that's kind of getting into just the reality is what you can observe, smell, touch, taste, feel, etc. Now, Taoism, on the other hand, which is something we mentioned in, I believe, in the Things That Are Backwards episode when we were talking about healthcare systems, Taoism, which is a very popular philosophy in the Far East, for them, the nature of reality is described as the Tao, Tao, an impersonal principle that underlies reality and is the process of how nature develops. Taoism views the world as the way of nature, or Tao, and believes that human actions in harmony with the Tao are the only ones that make sense. So the term Tao means a road and is often translated as the way. Um, and Tao is the process of reality itself, the way things come together while still transforming, which is the interesting part to me. And I love this sentence here. All this reflects the deep seated Chinese belief that change is the most basic character of things. So that to me is fascinating. I think a lot of times we resist change in many ways, especially societally, um, even though there may be strong reasons for change. But and that's why I think I classify myself as a progressive, because I'm always looking for change that's positive and that benefits people. So anyway, there's a couple more pieces of information here, and this is interesting too. So there is the Tao, but not the world or the cosmos in a Western sense, in that philosophy. And so Taoism is essentially just being one with nature and doing things that are natural are the only logical things to do. So because reality is ever changing and reality is the process, Tao is actually the process of things changing and evolving and within nature itself. So I don't know, any of those resonate with you particularly. Again, we've got the Platonic realism, we've got the empiricist model of Aristotle, and then we have Taoism so far. And there are many, 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 many others. I just started with those three as a way to kind of set the stage here. So I know that's a lot, but any of those three resonate with you?
Well, I'm still trying to get feeling back in my hand from writing so much while you were talking. No, just kidding. Um, yeah, I mean, they all kind of resonate in a way. I think about the last one you were talking about there, the Taoism, and the reality is ever changing and things like that. The word that jumped in my mind as you're talking about that, not necessarily in a reality sense, I guess, but just like the idea of harmony, right? That whole thing is
Right.
talking about, as the be part of the world, essentially be part of the things around you and experience everything together. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think it does make me think of modern society a little bit where we're always trying to, kind of like you said, if we're adverse to change, we're trying to kind of say what our reality is. It's this thing that I like. It's this pattern of doing things I'm comfortable with, and I'm trying to create my own reality. But in this idea reality, like you said, everything's changing around you, and your best bet is to just kind of flow with it. Get in a flow state. So that's probably the biggest thing. I thought the other two, the Plato and Aristotle pieces, while they had some different kind of definitions, they sort of did kind of speak to the same thing a little bit. Like you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
the senses in both of them, and how the physical world is sort of a well, it makes me go to some other things I think we've talked about just in our personal conversations in the past about the limitations of our senses and what we there might be a lot more to the world around us, but we're only able to perceive so much of it. You know what I mean? So I don't know if we want to go down that rabbit hole just yet, or or what else you had in
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah, well, I think I'll just add something to the Taoism piece, which is when I was doing some reading about that, that is one area where they're talking about the yin and yang and the balance of things always being um, not static but changing, and so broken things being fixed, and drought becoming monsoon, and just always in process. And I think you picked a great piece out there to highlight, which is that living in balance with that and understanding that change is going to happen, and to work within that and not fight against it, I think is a really logical way to look at that. So I really appreciate that. And from what I was reading, it seems like that's, maybe to me anyway, just on first glance, a fairly complicated ideology, but one that I'm definitely interested in learning more about. Because I definitely appreciate that, especially again, being kind of one with nature, and anything against that being illogical speaks to me. So yeah, let's dive into where your head was at towards the end there. I think that's an interesting place to go to start with.
Okay, well, I did want to comment on one thing you said there. Like
Sure.
it's complicated in its simplicity in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is it's a basic idea, but it's complicated for us to comprehend because, like I said, I think we as a society do so much in contrary to what that's saying. Right? We have to really challenge
Mm-hmm.
some of our own beliefs and ways of being to accept that kind of idea. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, especially if you consider where we are as a society. Now, granted, we have rural and urban populations as well. I'm not saying like China's unique in that they have rural and urban as well. But for them, I mean, it was 1+ billion people, and I think the majority are living in a simpler, more agrarian, rural environment, and so maybe it is easier, quote unquote, to kind of live that way or think that way when you aren't competing against this massive onslaught of consumerism and go capitalism and productivity gains, and stock market's going up, and you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to be productive, you have to do this all the time, and just that constant hum of modern technology around you all the time. It may be a little bit easier to see the simplicity instead of it having to be complicated to fit into what our society is now.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. But I I was kind of picturing the opposite of that in my head.
Mm.
First to say, I've never, never been to China, never experienced anything firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's other countries involved there, but I'm picturing, one of the, like you said, one of the most populated places in the world is, I think, where it is densely populated. It's really densely populated, and I think there
Mm-hmm.
you'd probably have to have a certain amount of this mindset just to function amongst that many people. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So just kind of a go with the flow. I always think of, and granted, like I said, I'm going from movies and things I see, but this, like, how traffic over there seems nuts and everybody's,
Mm-hmm.
going every which direction. And, um, so I think, like I said, you'd almost have to have a certain go with the flow mentality. But to be honest, I do see that when I am in more rural, or I'm sorry, more urban areas. Here is just sort of that acceptance that, like, hey, there's a lot of people around me, and I just kind of gotta, do my thing and weave in and out, and you know what I mean. Just, I mean, not to say you want to ignore everybody else around you, but you find a different way to operate in that same thing where you've got to let, like, not a person who loves crowds, but when you're in a
Right.
crowd, you got to figure out how to operate and just kind of be and just go with, leaving, my son and I went to a basketball game the other night, and a professional basketball game, and just the mass of humanity that's leaving that arena all at one time. You just kind of got to figure out what direction you kind of go and shoot the gaps when they show themselves, and just figure out how to get out and hope nobody gets hurt. You know what I mean? So I think some of that kind of
Yeah.
forces you to be that way a bit.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And another interesting thing I think of too with that is how the Chinese government operates in a certain way. And I'm no, super expert in the Chinese Communist Party by any means, but I've been just thinking in terms of how they've managed to keep their economy growing pretty steadily over the last 30, 40 years, and how they've been like burning coal, for example, like massive amounts of coal plants to produce their energy and to boost their middle class. And that seems very anti-Taoist, but the people themselves, I think, still have that overwhelmingly as their driving philosophy. So it's interesting that the government, in their pursuit of economic growth and trying to modernize the country, is doing things that are non-Taoist, but then the people themselves still hold on to that as their kind of governing day-to-day philosophy.
Yeah, that I've heard different things about you mentioned the burning of the coal, which I agree with you. I agree with the premise of where you're coming from with that. Um, I know it was several years ago that I heard some information about this, and it's like at the same time that China uh, was burning a lot of coal, burning a lot of fossil fuels to grow certain sectors of their economy and their market, they were also eyeing the replacement of it at the same time. So they were building up green
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure and doing a lot of those things. So they're like, it wasn't great that they were doing it, but they did see it as a very temporary means to an end. You know what I mean? To get to, to get
Yeah.
to a better place. But they knew if they didn't do that, they wouldn't grow at the rate that they wanted to. You know what I
Yeah, they
mean?
kind of
So
had to catch up on the world stage, and yeah,
yeah,
I think that's a good point because they are leading the world in EVs, um, in terms of production
cheap,
and adoption.
cheap
Yeah,
EVs.
yep, cheap EVs and solar panels, and I'm sure other green technology. They've definitely been pushing the forefront of that for a while now. So I think that's a good point. I think that's another way that they're different than us too. Excuse me, is that little more long term thinking, an actual strategy with, and I'm not by any means endorsing a communist form of government in this case, but you can almost see the continuity there, right? instead of changing a party every 4 years or every 8 years and having major upheavals every 2 years when if the House changes over here or when there's new elections and you drastically shift how you're going to govern a country of 330 million people, they're talking about 1.2 billion with 3 billion, something like that along those lines. I can't remember exactly, 1.4 billion that has been governed pretty consistently. Now, granted, a lot of problems with that too, but just in terms of this one example where you have a strategy, you have the same people in place more or less that see that strategy through over the course of decades, and it actually plays out in terms of avoiding just short-term thinking and making decisions that are going to be good for the long term. So I think there is something to be said for that. However, like I said, I'm not endorsing the system there by any means.
Well, yeah, and the other part of that, just to add on, is I think you have the government probably dictating what happens in the market more than the market influencing what the government does, with lobbyists and everything else. So
Yeah,
they
heavy
can
hand there.
they can draw that line in the sand that says, "Hey, we are going to do this for X number of years, and then we're going to switch to that." You know what I mean?
Mm.
Obviously, there's problems over there too when you hear about like all the massive empty skyscrapers that they've just built and then never,
Yeah.
never had occupancy for. But
Right,
we have
right.
strayed way off track of the reality conversation, so we'll get back to
Yeah.
the. Sorry, guys, we do this. Anyway, the thing I brought up, was the idea of our, you know, and again, referring back to a conversation that you and I have had before, but we'll bring it back up here, is like the idea that, we have certain senses as human beings. We have, eyes that can only see light in a certain range of the visual spectrum, or I should say the light spectrum. We can only see basically Roy G. Biv. We can't see X-rays. We can't see gamma rays. We can't see all that stuff. We have ears that can only hear from certain a certain range of frequencies. You know what I mean? We can only smell, near the smell sensory, abilities of like a dog or something like that.
Mhm.
And so what we've speculated before is that there's actually maybe a lot more things around us that we can't even perceive as part of our reality because we can't hear them, we can't see them, we can't, taste them, we can't smell them, we can't touch them. You know what I mean? So,
Yep.
we understand our reality as we can sense it, but maybe there's a lot more going on, that we just can't even experience. So,
Yeah.
under that same premise, then our reality is limited to exactly what we can experience. But
Yeah. Yeah. That's there was a very interesting graphic novel that I read called Providence, and it was about H.P. Lovecraft, and it kind of followed him back when he was just getting started in his writing career in New England in the early 20s or late teens of 1900s. And as he started uncovering various things, he was sort of acting like a detective, trying to uncover this interesting things going on in this town and or in these various towns up there. And I remember some really cool scenes of where he had these special sunglasses that he was able to take from somebody, and these were like ruby lensed sunglasses would show him all these fantastical creatures kind of like floating through the air, and then he would take them off and they weren't there, and then he would put them back on and they were like, sharing the same space as other people who were totally unaware of what was going on. And it was just an awesome visual representation of that concept. And I mean, we have a lot of detection measures. I mean, we can smash particles together and we can detect X-rays from outer space, and we can, see where planets are out in solar systems, out in other galaxies by the shifting light and or the lack of other light going on, and we can do all kinds of crazy things. But who's to say that we can pick up everything that's here around us, really, until we can actually observe and measure. We just don't really know for sure. I mean, there could be a whole race of creatures that's like literally on just a different spectrum that we just don't know about, or we don't have the technology to detect here. Or it could just be, out there in the solar system where, again, it's a different type of life form that we just don't have any concept of. So a lot of possibilities there for sure.
Yeah, I wanted to throw in there. I don't watch them too much anymore, but they're when some of the paranormal shows first got to be really popular, and you'd watch these guys play the like, and I can't even remember what they're called now, but certain there was like a certain machine they'd play that they would claim and let them tap into a certain frequency and hear, the paranormal talking to them and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
you do kind of want to like laugh about it, but how do we know that's not right? How do we know that's not exactly what we're saying? Tapping into that sort of an area that we can't otherwise experience normally. Now, and maybe there's some people that can. I mean, when people say they see ghosts and stuff, who are we to say for sure they can't? And
right,
kind of to something you maybe mentioned a little bit, how do we know that some of those other things can't turn off and on their ability to be detected? Right?
mm-hmm.
Like, could a ghost say, hey, I want this person to see me right now, and other times I don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that goes back to just the reality. I agree also with the with the Aristotelian model, I guess, which is we experience reality individually through our own senses, and that's as close as we're going to get to that. Now you kind of have another wrinkle, which is the quantum realm. Was there a different reality at the quantum level? And that's where you can literally have things, a molecule, something in a quantum state being in two states at once. So that's the theory behind quantum computing, is that you can have it be a 1 and a 0 at the same time, and it's that way until you observe it, which is just fascinating to me. So think about Schrodinger's cat, that thought experiment where you have a box on the table and there's a cat inside the box, but you don't know if the cat is alive or dead until you observe it. Until you take the lid off that box, it's both. And the act of observance is what solidifies that into reality. So that's a whole nother can of worms that I'm again by no means an expert in that area. I've just done some cursory reading on that kind of stuff, but it's also fascinating. Like we could get into, it would have to be another episode because I'd have to go back and do more research, but like emergence and things emerging from the quantum realm to the macro level of our understanding to our level of being, and so there's a whole scientific way to look at that rather than a philosophical way, and I'm just not equipped to really get into that too much. But I just thought it was fascinating how the more we learn about quantum reality, that could be really the actual basic fundamental reality, and everything else emerges from that.
So how do we know in the computing sense? And I know you just said you maybe don't know, but like when you say it's a 1 and a 0 at the same time, like how do you know that? Like that's where I'm a little tripped up on that.
So
Like,
that's where, like, a byte in normal silicon based computing is either a 1 or a 0. But in quantum computing, it can be both, and it can change states back and forth. So that's how you get multiple threads of possibilities being explored all at the same time in the quantum computing space versus just one path being explored at once in the traditional computing environment. Because it can literally be binary, excuse me, non-binary going forward and exploring all the different, like, it can be both as it goes. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, I mean a little bit, but I'm thinking wouldn't code or something controlling it have to dictate that it is one or the other at any given time, if it's to have any meaning or to have any,
well, if you're trying to have an output, but if you're just, let's say you're trying to run an equation, that is trying to pinpoint, the exact location of a star, you know, 700 light years away, and all these other pieces, and you put that all into the equation, and then because quantum computing isn't just linear, it can explore maybe that's a bad example in terms of what you'd be trying to find out, but a better example is an ideal route for a UPS driver in a busy city. And he's got 50 packages and he's got 5 hours, and these are all the addresses. And then quantum computing can simultaneously look at all the different possible routes at once, whereas a linear computing platform would only be able to do one at a time and say, like, oh, okay, so this one, route A, that takes 5 hours and 30 minutes, route B, and then it has to go start from scratch and then retrace that route. So whereas quantum, because it can explore multiple paths at once, it can look at all those different solutions at once and come to the optimal conclusion much sooner.
Okay, I think I get it enough for the
Okay.
for the sake of the conversation.
At least for the purposes of where we're at right here. I mean, it would take a lot of extra research, but we could totally do a whole episode on just quantum things and quantum computing. It's fascinating, but it's definitely a technical discussion.
Yeah, the whole Schrodinger's cat thing. I think of the even maybe the simpler question you get. Or I always heard growing up. If a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there to hear it, does it make any sound?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or
yeah.
Yeah, that is kind of fascinating things to think about. And well, okay, so that got me thinking about, I was watching the movie Interstellar again the other day, and I hadn't seen that for a couple years. And the one thing that jumped out to me, and maybe they've done it in other movies, but how in some of the scenes where there was stuff going on outside of the spaceship, they made it completely silent. You know what I mean? You could see things happening, but there was no sound. And there's something about space then that takes that sense away from us, right?
Yeah.
There's supposedly no sound in space. Well, is there? Or can we just, because of the composition of space, can we just not hear it in what our ears allow us to hear? You know what I mean? Back to that sensory idea. But I guess you'd think at this point we'd probably have some sophisticated technology that would let us pierce that in.
Yeah, because if there literally is no sound in a vacuum on Earth too, then that's as close as we can come to recreating actual that part of the space environment thinking from that perspective. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm also thinking and we've mentioned reality tunnels before too, which is a concept from Robert Anton Wilson, and it's where everyone has their own reality tunnel that they live in, but you're free to literally experiment with anybody else's reality tunnel if you wanted to. You could go into the reality tunnel of a person on a different political spectrum than you and see what that's like, kind of dive in and see what if this is what I believed? What if this was my perception of things? And so you can explore other people's reality tunnels, but it's an interesting way to look at it in that everyone has their own their own take on things, their own perception, their own reality in a way. And it's a lot of times it comes down to how we navigate those different realities and how we share certain parts of them, how we discuss and debate other parts of them. Where do we draw the line? What's fine with one reality tunnel is acceptable, and then we can live with that. And then other people's reality tunnels, we just leave them to do their own thing because we can't coexist in that certain way. So I think that's another interesting concept that we've touched on a little bit before as well.
Yeah, I think we touched, you did mention that specifically in one episode, and I think in a different one we talked about, kind of critical thinking versus belief too, and different acts that we sometimes have to take to challenge, you know, the idea of maybe our own reality tunnel. You know, like you said, you could go experience others, but you have to kind of want to do that. You have to either have the curiosity, which I think we also touched on. Look, it's all coming together, folks. It's like a big bowl of spaghetti, just all leading one thing leading right back into another.
That gravy's good.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of comes to what we talked about even at the beginning here was, you know, you have to want to change, right? Or you have to at least be open to it. If you just kind of lock yourself into this a certain way of being or thinking, then, like I said, to me that feels like you're often trying to establish your own reality. You know, like
instead of just observing what is out there.
Yeah, this is what I'm comfortable with, so this is what I'm gonna make my own reality to a large extent.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, you know, you mentioned beliefs, and I think that's a big one. We could probably spend a lot of time on that. I don't want to get too far down into like the religious aspect, but I did already bring up Taoism, so that's kind of broaching the subject a little bit. But, you know, I'll touch on this just for a minute, is that beliefs can form reality just as much as our senses and our empirical observations, because most people that I've talked to, and this is my some of my personal experience too, is that my beliefs were shaped by what I believed were divinely inspired experiences. And so I didn't directly observe anything like an angel, or, you know, a messenger from God, or you know, any sort of miracle or anything like that that would be from that realm that might directly impact my personal experience in that way. But I interpreted I interpreted experiences to be divine, and therefore that helped shape my beliefs. My beliefs were never just based on experiences or feelings, but that was a big part of it. And so if you think about it, you have people that, and I'm not necessarily criticizing, I'm just saying I've heard this story so many times, or variations on this story so many times, that people's feelings then inform their beliefs, which then set their reality. And I don't think that should be the order of that goes in, personally. But if you have someone that has a spiritual experience and then believes that God is real, Jesus Christ is the Son of God, he came down, was sacrificed, etc., etc., you believe in that whole mythology, that's your reality now. And that's based off of belief. That's not based on any kind of empirical or logical reasoning. And so it's interesting that so many people around the world get there, um, and that's their reality in one form or another, whether it's Islam or Judaism or Christianity or any number of other religions. A lot of people get to that place and get to that reality, that shared reality for them, in a very similar way.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, a couple things out of that. I mean, I kind of feel the opposite a little in that, or maybe not the opposite, but I've often, and again, this is not to be critical so much here, but to just explore, you know, the ideas. But I've often kind of found myself thinking that beliefs are sometimes the opposite of reality.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, this one might be a little touchy, but let's go to the idea of, you know, people that, you know, winning quarterback wins a football game. And thanks God for, you know, oh, divine, you know, he was watching over me and, you know, inspired me and this and that. And it's like, well, maybe, but that then assumes that that same God had a problem with the other quarterback on the other team and everybody else on the other team. You know what I mean? So the
Mm-hmm.
chances of that seems slim to me, but there's someone who's, I mean, I can see where you're coming from, that you could say, oh, that belief is forming my reality, because to me that's real.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm saying I kind of think that belief is outside of reality, because the chances, like I said, of, you know, that actually having taken place is slim. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I guess I don't know. I mean, I don't know either. That's
Yeah.
my reality, is that I don't think it's so. I guess in the
Yeah.
same way, that argument could be made about me. I mean, I'll eat some humble pie
Yeah.
on that one a little bit. You know what I mean? If I don't believe, then, then I'm forming, I guess, my reality based on the same principle, just the opposite idea. So, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, like I said, sometimes I get thinking and I'm midstream and I, come to another realization. So,
Yeah, totally. Well, and then again, that's just other people's reality tunnels, right? Where it's not just it's a mix of what they believe and what they experience, and all that comes together to form that reality. So I think I don't think you're giving people's beliefs enough credit in terms of them forming their realities, because I
that's
mean,
fair.
literally,
That's
at
fair.
least I don't think so. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, it is so powerful too, right? Because that goes to people's everyday lives, depending on your level of adherence to your particular religion. That can impact your traditions, your holidays, your what you wake up and do first thing in the morning. Do you wake up and say a prayer in the first thing, and then do you spend during the day like thinking of Bible verses that apply to your any given situation that you're in? And you can have a deep commitment to that faith that you've never really observed, but you still believe strongly, and that's your reality. So yeah. Yeah.
No, that is a great point. Actually, I will have to. I'll do some thinking on that more as we even after this. I think that's
Yeah.
so. I'm curious, because I've known you for a long time, but this divinely inspired experiences you were talking about,
Hmm.
is that something you're willing to go into, or uh,
Well, yeah, I
well,
mean, I can
and let
share a
me
couple
let me
examples.
let me let me preface. So I'm asking you from the standpoint that I know you've claimed even on here that is it an agnostic atheist?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then when you say that, and then say you had divinely inspired experiences, I'm curious, because there seems like right there seems like a bit of a conflict in a way. So I'm
Oh yeah.
curious.
Well, and this was when I was still active in the Catholic Church, and so the examples that I'm going to give, and so at the time there was no conflict, because I might have been leaning agnostic even then, but I certainly wasn't an atheist. I did fully believe in God and the tenets of the Roman Catholic Church. So I would say one of the ones that happened multiple times was we would do these youth retreats. I was in the youth group, and then we would put on these retreats that would last over a weekend, and you'd have different people speaking and giving talks and sharing personal experiences, and of course all the singing and the camaraderie and all that stuff. It was just designed to get people kind of to come together and grow in their faith and get to know each other better and all that. And so I was in the planning groups for these, because I was not exactly like a leader in the youth group by any means, but just, strong participant, and was fairly charismatic, I guess. So I usually ended up giving some type of talk in these retreats, and multiple times there would be, um, like we would, kind of lay hands on each other and like pray and say like, okay, I feel like, I'm being called to lead this type of talk, or help lead these activities, and this is where I feel like I can be most useful during the retreat. And sometimes there would be no sensations whatsoever, like you might have a couple people's hands on your shoulders, maybe one on the top of your head or something, and you'd be just kind of going along with the flow, and you'd be praying and everything, which is already kind of a heightened uh, activity, or heightened a moment anyway, and you're kind of into it, and you're wanting to hear an answer, you're wanting to be useful and spiritually empowered and all this stuff. And so sometimes you would feel this really like hot, like, you know, sensation coming from people's hands on you. And that might be when someone might be saying, is anyone called to do X, Y, or Z? And so it would literally be like physical sensations that weren't always there, but were at certain times. So those types of things would come up, and it would almost be like an affirmation of where you were going or your prayers or whatever. So that would be one type of thing. And then the other big one was I was out. I had just gotten my license not too long before this, and because I didn't have my license until I was 18, and so finally got that. I think it was like late summer of that first year that I had it, and I was out on a country road and I was looking at a map at this intersection. I was just stopped at a stop sign, and then I put the map away and I just started to go, and I forgot to look. When I first pulled up to the intersection, I had looked left and right, but then I looked at the map and I forgot to look left and right again before I was going to cross this intersection. And barreling over this hill was a dump truck, and I slammed on the brakes just as I got going. I was able to put it in reverse in time, and if I had just kept going, I would have been just annihilated because this guy had no stop sign and he was fully in the right of way, and I just forgot to look. So like that kind of experience, when you're already in this space of everything being or having a purpose, every action, every non-action, every thought, every prayer, whatever, is part of a plan. And when you're already in that mindset, something simple like that is seen as like a miracle. And so at the time, that's how I viewed it, and then when I told my parents when I got home, that was their take as well. And so they were affirming my take on what that situation meant. So narrowly being smushed was not just not just good luck, but divine providence, that kind of thing.
So what made you notice the truck? You must have looked then, or did he lay on his horn or something, or
It
what?
was more hearing it, because he
Okay.
was just up on the other side of a hill, so I couldn't really hear him on that side of the hill. But once he crested the hill and started coming down, it was just that loud, like when you hear like a big diesel coming your way. Yeah, so it was more just the barely hearing it and then glancing, and then being able to stop in time. So yeah. So
Interesting.
that's and so now looking back on it, of course, I think the retreat planning, all that was like, okay, we were all primed to feel something. We were looking for something. We were looking as hard as we possibly could for some validation of our beliefs, and we got it. You could always find something. And then with the near accident, that was just really good luck. That was just me being careless and then having the good luck to catch a sign of it coming at the last second and being able to avoid it. So
Okay, so I might poke at that a little bit
sure.
because now I'm curious. You had the experience and you attributed it to divine intervention at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that shaped your reality of that situation.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here going, sounds like you just heard the truck. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? And
Yeah.
you're
But why
lucky
did I hear the truck? But why did I hear the truck?
because
That's
it makes noise and your ears work.
yeah. But I just could easily have had the music loud enough, or I probably had the window down a little bit because it was summer, and like if I didn't have the window down, like if you start thinking of all the little what ifs, and like why did I get saved, is basically because it's also religion's also a very, at its core, at the highest level, it's not selfish. It's supposed to be an altruistic type thing, but when you think about it, it is kind of selfish. It's like, oh, me, my experiences and my I'm special because God intervened in my life.
Yeah, God was
You know,
looking
like,
down on me. Just like the
yeah,
quarterback thing I was talking about, right?
yeah,
The
the
quarterback.
quarterback, like, God loves, NC State, but not UNC or whatever. So it's like, why, And so I think that's part of it too, for sure.
Okay, so now you've since strayed away from religion. So you've had something that overpowered those feelings that you had back then
Hmm.
and kind of reshaped your reality in
Yeah.
a sense, or allowed you to define reality differently.
Yeah. Logic
So,
and reason, the two
okay.
biggest things.
Okay. All right.
Just hands down, logic and reason. Everything goes through those filters now, instead of the filter of, any kind of mystical thinking or spiritualism or anything like that. It's all about logic and reason and probabilities and, things like that. Yeah.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I personally agree with that premise, but like we've said, a lot of people adhere to religions, and I mean, hey, if at the end of the day it makes you a better person or makes you, then more power to you.
Yeah.
I guess my whole thing, if we start to venture into the political realm just a little bit, please respect my rights and belief and choice not to adhere to any of those those things. Please don't force yours upon
Right.
me. I won't force mine upon you. You know what I mean?
Right.
If we can all disagree on that, then we'll be fine.
Yep. Yep.
Um,
Yeah. And I think we could get into the political. However, I think we should probably kind of call it there and leave it at that. I know it's tempting because there are also similar examples, from religion to religion on the political side as well, where people have their own beliefs and that becomes their reality and that shapes their actions and words as well. But I think,
we've touched on that in some previous
yeah,
episodes, like the
yeah,
pre and post election ones we did. I think
yep,
we kind of dabbled in that a bit.
yep, yep. And I think just in the interest of giving that a break,
Yep.
like we talked about, I
Yep.
think we'll pass over most of that. Now, granted, not everything is, or we can't totally just pretend like that stuff's not happening, or it's still not a big topic. But yeah, I don't know. Any other thoughts in general on reality or what we experience versus what we believe?
Let me just poke just a little bit at the politics one. I apologize, but based on some of the things we were just talking about though, and like experiences and
Hmm.
things like that, let me go to just January 6th real quick.
Okay.
So I remember where I was on that day, what room of the house I was in, watching that go down on TV live. Okay. And then I remember 3 or 4 days after seeing nothing but video footage of things happening that day. Now, I'm not here to say every single person that went down there was involved in something they shouldn't have been, but I'm telling you, I saw footage live of things happening that shouldn't have been happening. Okay? I think New York Times put together like a 45-minute kind of little mini documentary on kind of the chronologically of that day. Then fast forward 2 years or so. I forget, I think Mike Johnson at the time decides to release all the footage to Tucker Carlson. Okay.
That was McCarthy, actually, but
Oh, McCarthy.
yeah,
Was it McCarthy?
McCarthy was
Okay.
still there. Yeah,
Okay. All right.
at the
Thanks.
very end. Yeah, no
Okay.
worries. Yeah, this was at the very end of his term.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So he hands it over to Tucker Carlson. And I remember you and I happened to be together at the time,
Hmm.
sitting in a restaurant or bar, and on Fox News on TV, that segment comes up where Tucker convinces half the country that didn't happen because he plays 15 seconds of looped little clips of people that just happened to be walking through the hallway in an orderly fashion.
Hmm.
And I've seen other discussions, other podcasts where they refer to that 15 seconds of footage that Tucker shows and says January 6th didn't happen. So how do we square things like that when for a lot of people that belief now is their reality, but we know what happened?
Oh, man, that's a tough question because, yeah, you literally have, it's a matter of, well, it's a matter of two things, really. It's a matter of one, which videos are you seeing or not seeing? And then two, unfortunately, it's even down to whether you believe what you're seeing or not anymore. You know what I mean? Now, especially now when you throw an AI into the mix, I'm not saying that was at play here, but when you've got that as part of the equation too, it's not only did you see the clip, but do you believe the clip? And so, man, yeah, that's that's just a bonkers one to me because how far do you have to have your head in the sand to not see the broader context of that and to just believe? But then again, again, it's part of, it's like, who's the messenger there? If it was any old person, would it have the same impact? If it was someone other than Tucker who had a stranglehold on the right wing propaganda and cable news for a long time. But yeah, that's like literally editing reality into a false narrative. And unfortunately, that's propaganda right there. So propaganda is designed to bend reality into for a different purpose. So unfortunately, I think you're always going to have that, and it's very powerful.
But can we say that? So I'm going back to feelings inform beliefs that set reality. Is that reality true or false for those people that to them reality is it didn't happen?
I mean, to them, that's their reality tunnel. That version of events is accurate, and all the other stuff is not real, or they just didn't see it. So they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. So
So that to
yeah.
me though is an example where, and again, I'm not trying to pick on people, but your belief is not reality. We all saw it happen. And you can say, I believe that didn't happen, or I don't believe that happened. It happened. So it just,
Yeah.
that's where I struggle. That's where I struggle with beliefs
Yeah.
sometimes because
Yeah.
you can too easily say, I don't believe in something or I do believe in something. And maybe we touched on this. I don't remember. But we fuck kids up right off the bat, where we tell them Santa Claus is real, and we tell them the Easter Bunny is real, and we do all this stuff, and then they believe it, and then they get to a certain age, and we shatter their trust in a way that, hey, remember the things you believed for the first 7-8 years of your life? Well, guess what? It wasn't real. You know what I mean? Um, so I don't know I don't know
Yeah.
where exactly I was going with that, but it's just I don't know. That's where I struggle with beliefs. Well, I'll
Yeah.
stop there.
Yeah. No, I know. I get what you're saying for sure, and it's definitely frustrating, especially when you're trying to have a conversation, like a civil conversation, with someone who's in that space, and their beliefs are their reality, and it doesn't match up with objective reality. It's pretty tough. It's pretty tough for sure, and I think that's where we can go back to the things that we've said around trying to be trying to be patient, trying to have some empathy, but also standing your ground when it's important, and when it's based in truth and it's based in reality, not just your truth, but objective truth. And I know that's a whole different subject that we could get into. Is there any such thing as objective reality or objective truth? But um, I think in this case, that you're the example that you're giving, yeah, I mean, we saw it. It happened. It's real. It wasn't Antifa. It wasn't the FBI planting agents in the crowd. It was what it was, and yeah, it will be that way forever.
The Earth is round. It's
Yes.
provable. It's a
Yes.
provable thing. You can say you don't believe it all you want, but it's not you, but it's round. It's
Yeah.
scientifically provable, like a bunch of different ways. But like your belief is counter to reality if you believe it is flat. I'm sorry,
Yep.
it's your right to believe it if you want, but it's not reality, and it's not reality just because you believe it, right? Like,
Yeah.
so anyway,
Yeah.
was there anything else on the overall reality topic you wanted to get to that we didn't?
No. For me, I'm good.
Okay, hopefully this didn't get too rabbit holey for anybody that's listening, but
Yeah, no, we kind of went all over the place, but I think that's what we do. So if you're here for it, cool. If not, then maybe this isn't the show for you. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. We had a great time this week, and we'll see you all again next week. Take care.